All right, it's the start of a new week, and we are here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You get you going here on a Monday. You get your morning shave, you get your morning shower, and you get your morning pit. All the talking points and things you need to be talking about or you're going to be thinking about today as you start your week. All the Pitt sports things there are to say and do and think about and talk about. And we got a lot to talk about today, and basketball may or may not be on the docket for that one after Friday night. I intended to sit down here and talk about basketball on this first morning pit of the week. We'll see if we get to it at the end. We will talk basketball at various points this week, but it's like I'm weighing it out here. Would I rather talk about the Virginia game where Pitt won 37-7 behind a dominating defense and an offense that has plenty of talking points to get into? Or would I rather talk about a 25-point loss to West Virginia at the Peterson Event Center? I'm going to start with the football stuff. Maybe we'll get to hoops. We'll probably talk about it later in the week. Listen, if you want to make sure you don't miss any of that hoops discussion, and who would want to miss that, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Also, like this video. You can make sure you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. When we go live on Wednesday nights for the live Panther-Lair show, although we're going to change that this week due to having some basketball games there in the middle of the week. And when we go live for the Panther-Lair show on Wednesday nights at 8:30, typically when we go live after the football games on Saturdays, like we did this past Saturday, like we'll do again this coming Saturday, you don't want to miss any of that. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Turn on notifications so you get an alert sent to your phone, and you'll never miss any of our live streams anytime we do it. Like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you in advance for doing that. So like I said, a 37-7 win for Pitt over Virginia on Saturday. And, so there's always the classic sort of Twitter replies of, man, Virginia stinks. Stop talking about this. Virginia stinks. And you get those replies when you start tweeting out things that Pitt did well or accomplished over the weekend. And it's understandable, although I think, sometimes those replies miss the point that, you're not sitting here saying Pitt's going to win the ACC or make the playoffs, or you're not trying to make anything more out of it than what it is, which is that Pitt had a pretty good game. And the defense in particular was dominant against Virginia. And Virginia is not good. They've only won 3 games this season, and there's a reason for that. Their offense is one of the worst, if not the worst, in the ACC. But the reality is, not everybody, is still able to force them to play at that level. You still have to go out and execute against a bad offense. If you don't play well, I guess I would put it this way. Would you rather have a dominating performance against a bad offense, or would you rather be the game where a bad offense comes alive and finds its groove? I mean, obviously you would take the former, and Pitt certainly did with one of the more dominating defensive performances we've seen in quite some time. And it's funny because a week ago, after the Syracuse game, when Pitt won that one 19-9, Pat Narduzzi was asked in the post-game press conference, was this the best defensive performance you've gotten out of a team at Pitt? And I kind of balked at the question a little bit. Narduzzi hesitated, wasn't really, just said, I don't know. We've played really well. I don't know how that ranks or anything like that. And to be honest, there's not a game that comes to mind for me where I'd say, boy, that was the best defensive performance they've had, because I think to really narrow something like that down out of 100 games or whatever that Narduzzi has coached, out of 8 seasons, close to 8 full seasons that he's coached, it's tough to pick one out of that and say that game was the best defensive performance we've seen. I mean, they had a couple games in 2015. I think Virginia and Virginia Tech, defense played really well in those games. There have been different games over the years, but nothing that really jumps out. And last week's game, they only gave up 3 field goals to Syracuse. They played really well against a backup quarterback. I don't know if we're going to really remember that game all that much. And certainly if we start talking about great defensive performances, I don't think anybody's going to be like, the 2022 Syracuse game, because there wasn't anything really remarkable about it. They just stopped them. They didn't really give up anything. And they got a safety. That was the highlight play of the game. Now, fast forward to this past Saturday, and you have a real contender for the best defensive performance that we've seen from a Narduzzi team, because they had those big impact plays. 2 pick sixes on the first 2 plays of the game. That's something you're going to remember. You're not going to forget that. You probably haven't forgotten things like, Ryan Lewis's interception against Penn State in 2016. You probably, chances are you might still remember Theron Coleman making an interception in overtime against, Syracuse in 2018, one of the games that set Pitt on course for the Coastal Division title. Probably more so, you remember MJ Devonshire with a pick six against West Virginia earlier this season. Those big plays are the ones that are going to stand out, and getting back-to-back pick sixes to open the game. That's going to stick with you. And then when you look at the performance over the rest of the game, just the dominance that Pitt displayed. 144 yards allowed, -8 rushing yards allowed, 2 third down conversions allowed, and 8 sacks recorded. I mean, that is a dominant defensive performance. I keep sort of tweeting this, and it's funny to me. If you look over the last 2 games, Ben Sauls has scored 18 points with 6 extra points and 4 field goals. Ben Sauls, 18 points. Syracuse and Virginia combined in the last 2 weeks have scored 14 points. Or 16. 16 points. Yeah, because Syracuse scored 3 field goals and Virginia scored 1 touchdown. So Ben Sauls, the kicker, has outscored Virginia and Syracuse in the last 2 weeks. And actually, if you want to look at it another way, Pitt's defense has scored 16 points in the last 2 weeks with 2 pick sixes and a safety. And Syracuse and Virginia's offenses combined have scored 16 points in the last 2 weeks. So there's a lot of fun ways that you can say, hey, the defense has been really playing well in the last 2 weeks. But I'll tell you something that sticks out to me, and something that I think is particularly relevant, and it's a big part of the success they're having, and it's good for the chances of defensive success going forward. And it's sort of reflective of some of the struggles they had earlier in the season, or at least something that was missing from this defense. And it's the production out of the defensive end position. It really is. Through the first 8 games, the 3 senior defensive ends, Haba Baldonado, John Morgan, Deslin Alexandra, through the first 8 games combined for 3.5 sacks. Now that right there is a remarkably low total. It's a very concerning total. These are 3 guys you were counting on for production, 3 guys you were counting on to generate and lead the pass rush, and they were still getting into the backfield. They were still getting sacks from the defense, but those 3 guys in particular, especially number 87, especially Baldonado, were expected to put up some serious numbers this year. And they had 3.5 sacks through 8 games. Now, Deslin Alexandra missed 3 of those games and really only played about 15 snaps in the opener against West Virginia. Haba Baldonado, I think, has missed 1 game and has been sort of limited at different points. He's been banged up. But 3.5 sacks, I mean, the production speaks for itself, and it was missing from this defense. In the last 2 games, those 3 guys have combined for 7 sacks. So 3.5 sacks through 8 games, 7 in the last 2. Twice as much, doubled the production. It's been remarkable to see, and it has a lot to do with the success they've had in the last 2 games. It's been missing from this defense. Now Pitt's defense is back where I think it is supposed to be. Number 1 in the ACC in sacks, number 1 in the nation in sacks. Nobody in the country has more sacks than Pitt right now. I think they have 36. And a big part of it is those 3 guys finally kind of coming together and making plays. So at Virginia on Saturday, Pitt had 8 sacks. Baldonado, Alexandra, and Morgan had 4 of those 8. Of course, Kalijah Kancey had a whole lot to do himself. He had 3 sacks in that game. We'll talk about him in a second. And then Judson Tallender blitzing out of the, I think he was out of the Delta package, blitzed and got a sack there from the safety position. But it's really those defensive ends where it's been missing for Pitt, so far this season, and then getting that production out of those guys has been huge in the last 2 games. And then Kalijah Kancey. We hype players up. We talk guys up through the offseason. We talk about this guy, and he's on this watch list, and he's on that watch list, and he's a preseason this, and he's a preseason that. And boy, he's in line for a huge season, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do that. And sometimes it comes to fruition, and sometimes it doesn't. Kalijah Kancey, it's coming to fruition. He was unstoppable on Saturday. Unstoppable. 22 pass rush snaps, and he had created pressure on 9 out of those 22 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus. He finished the game with 3 sacks. Virginia could not block Kalijah Kancey. They couldn't. And they tried to run a trick play to get the defense all out of sorts, and Kancey was almost to Brennan Armstrong before the ball got back to him. I mean, he was unstoppable. The only thing that stopped Kalijah Kancey or slowed him down was when they had him on the sideline getting a rest and other guys were playing. I mean, he was just unstoppable. And they're going to need him to be just as good this week against Duke as he was against Virginia. I mean, Duke's offensive line will probably present a little bit more of a challenge or an obstacle for Kancey than Virginia's did. But he needs to play at a high level if they're going to stop this Duke offense, particularly the quarterback Riley Leonard and what he likes to do. And right now, Kancey is just playing at a really, really high level. And it's fun to watch. We've been spoiled around here with playmaking defensive tackles, by which I mean there have been a few over the last 15 years or so. You go back to Mick Williams, then, of course, Aaron Donald. Jalen Twyman had a great year in 2019. And now Kancey, over the last 2 seasons, last year and this year. He is just a force in the middle. I don't know what his NFL career is going to be like. He's smaller than Twyman was. He's smaller than Donald was. He obviously can produce, though. I mean, the guy is relentless force in the middle of the defensive line, whether you put him on a 4-man line in the base defense, whether you put him in a 3-man line in the Delta package, it doesn't matter. He is really tough to stop, and he's playing at a really high level right now. It's remarkable to see. It really is. When you have those seasons where a guy is just playing out of his mind, you have to appreciate it. Jordan Addison last year, Jalen Twyman in 2019, Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver in 2020 when they were all Americans. Kenny Pickett obviously last year. We've seen guys play at a really, really high level, and Kalijah Kancey's there right now. He is playing at that kind of level. 3 sacks against Virginia tells a whole lot of the story. On the other side, as we talk about sacks, and I don't think this, I don't think this can be mentioned enough, that Pitt yesterday or on Saturday, rather, did not give up any sacks. And granted, they didn't drop back to pass that many times. What did they end up with? Keaton Slovis had 24 pass attempts. So, 24 passes, 48 rushing attempts, including a kneel down or 2. So, an obvious imbalance there, right? What is that, a 3-to-1 balance or something like that, or 3-to-2 balance? I don't know what the math is. You can figure that out. But a heavy run, so less opportunities for sacks. But we've seen Keaton Slovis take sacks pretty much every game this season, right? And the pass protection is broken down pretty much every game this season, but it really didn't on Saturday. And Virginia was no slouch when it comes to sacks. I think they were 3rd in the ACC in sacks coming into Saturday's game. They were ahead of Pitt. They had more sacks than Pitt did heading into Saturday's game. I want to say they had 30 and Pitt had 29 prior to Saturday. And so this was a team that has been in the past capable of getting after the quarterback, and they didn't get any on Saturday. They didn't get any in that game in Charlottesville, and I'm going to give credit to the offensive line. Now, I don't know if it was about Owen Drexel returning. I don't know if it was about playing Branson Taylor and Matt Gonsalves as Gabe Hoy did not travel. I don't know if it was about kind of rotating the right guards with Jake Cradle kind of settling back in there, but also Blake Zabovic playing. I don't know what. There were probably a variety of factors. Maybe it was a good game plan. Maybe it was good scouting. I don't know. But they did a good job, and they protected Keaton Slovis, and I think he looked as comfortable and as settled in on Saturday as he has all year. I thought he really did look comfortable in a way that he hasn't looked comfortable for extended stretches, maybe in any game this season. He's had moments here or there when he seemed comfortable in the pocket, but not nearly like he did on Saturday, pretty much for the entire game. I thought he was able to make the throws that he made because he wasn't really under pressure. His touchdown pass, he was under pressure. He took a hit, he took a shot, and he knew he was going to take a shot, and he hung in there to deliver the ball to Bub Means. But on the whole, Keaton Slovis was pretty clean in the pocket, and that's a credit to Pitt's offensive line and pass protection. It's not just the line; it's the running backs I thought did a good job picking up the pass pro as well. And somebody on Twitter suggested, well, yeah, I mean, of course there's no sacks. They had all these holding calls. And Pitt was called for 5 offensive holding penalties on Saturday. That's true, but only one of those 5 was on an offensive lineman. And really, that's the only one. As you look kind of play by play, how each of those penalties happened, or more relevantly, where those penalties happened. The holding penalty on Owen Drexel was really the only one that you would say was a protection penalty. You know, they run a screen to Izzy Abanikanda that gets 16 yards on a whatever, 2nd and 17 or whatever it was, 1st and 17, something like that. They get 16 yards on a screen. It comes back on a hold. Little, play to, who was the last one on? There was like a running play. Gavin Bartholomew had a hold downfield. There was that little like pop pass thing they did with Vincent Davis late in the game. Bub Beans got a holding penalty on that. Carter Johnson had a holding penalty downfield. Jared Wayne had a holding penalty downfield. There were all these downfield holds. And so even it wasn't even like Pitt was egregiously holding to keep Kedon Slovis clean. I think they just protected him well. I think the protection was solid. So, good for the offensive line. Good job by those guys kind of holding up out there. And, as a result, I think Kedon Slovis played pretty well. There were passes I'm sure he would like to have back. There were passes he could have made better than he did. He certainly could have, he probably had a few opportunities. He had an opportunity, I think, for at least 1 or 2 more touchdowns, probably, if he makes the passes a little bit better. But I thought the passes that he did make well were pretty good. I like the touchdown throw. He hung in there, took a shot, and gave Bub Means a chance to make a play, and Bub Means made the play. He had a throw to the sideline. I think it was to Jared Wayne. It was an NFL throw. It was a big-time throw. I think he's doing a good job at finding, Konate Mumfield. And he's doing, that relationship is developing. They obviously still need to get their timing down and their chemistry down, because that was a touchdown that they could have had when they missed Mumfield on a deep pass where he underthrew Mumfield. If he had kind of laid it out for him a little bit further, it's probably a touchdown and quick strike score on the first drive of the second half. And so Slovis wasn't perfect, but I think it was, it was suggested, Pat Narduzzi, I think, said that the Syracuse game was maybe Slovis' sharpest game yet, the best he has played. And I guess I would more or less agree with that. But in that case, I would look ahead and I would say this game at Virginia on Saturday, when he actually threw a touchdown pass to a wide receiver, I made a number of other pretty good throws. I would say this was another step forward. And I remember thinking this back with Nathan Peterman, maybe in 2015. I remember watching, and there would be games where you would think he would be making some steps forward, and then there'd be games where you say, man, you did not progress here. And probably not even game to game, more like drive to drive, quarter to quarter, or drive to drive. Of, okay, all right, seemed okay on that drive. Ooh, now he's making a few of those mistakes again. I think we sometimes forget what our perception was of Nathan Peterman prior to the Clemson game. I think when he first kind of burst on the scene early in the 2015 season, everybody was excited about him, but he didn't play that great. He was more or less efficient over the course of that season. And 2016, he was fine up until the Clemson game, when he had the game of his life, the game of his career, played himself into an NFL career, I think, in that game. And I think that changed the perception of him among Pitt fans as well, and rightfully so. I mean, if you have that game, you play like that in that environment against that team, against that defense, yeah, you can wear that you can build your career on that, and that's fine. But what I remember thinking about that is the idea, and I think I might have written it at the time, talked about it on a podcast at the time, that it's not just going to be all steps forward. It's not just this perfect process where you just keep taking steps. It's great. You get better every time you drop back. There's progress and there's, regression. It happens. You want to end up with more progress than regression. At the end of the day, at the end of each game, or at the end of each, probably at the end of each game, you want to look and say, was there net progress? And I think there was. I think there was after the North Carolina game. I think there was net progress after the Syracuse game, and I think there was net progress after this Virginia game. Maybe by the end of the season, it'll be something of a competent, dangerous passing attack. And I think the opportunity was there for it as well on Saturday. Excuse me. I think the opportunity was there for the passing attack to be even more competent than it was. But as I've talked about a bunch of times, I mean, they just kept shooting themselves in the foot and putting themselves. The offense kept putting itself in a difficult position that it's not really built to come out of. First and 20, second and 25. This is not the kind of offense that can approach that. They can attack that situation and overcome it. Last year's offense could. Last year's offense, they would get a holding call on first down. It'd be a 1st and 20 or something like that. I never really remember thinking like, well, there goes that drive. That's a drive killer. That's it. Because it felt like more often than not, they converted those. More often than not, they ended up getting moving the sticks and keeping the drive alive because they were built to attack situations like that and excel in situations like that. This offense isn't built that way. Not this year, at least. It's hard to make up 1st and 20 or 2nd and 25 when your offense is built on running the ball, and you're just not consistent enough passing that you can assume you're going to break those plays and make up those distances. You kind of avoid some of those holding calls. You get a couple, you stay in sort of regular down and distance situations. And I think the passing game probably even goes a little bit further. I think they score more. I think this team definitely shot itself in the foot a lot. They probably top 50 if they don't have 5 holding calls. And certainly, they score touchdowns on each of their first 2 drives. The next 3 drives, they go scoreless with a holding penalty on each one that set up 2nd and 25, I think, on the first one, and then 1st and 20 on each of the next 2. If that doesn't happen, if you don't have those holding calls, their offense was moving the ball well. Their offense was excelling. And I think they would have kept that up and scored another touchdown or 2 and probably, had a decent chance at scoring 50 in this game. Because in the second half, too, they had, 2 field goal drives. Well, the field goal drives weren't as much about the holding penalties as they were just kind of curious decision-making, play calling inside the 10. They get to the 8. They have 3rd and 6 at the 8 on one drive, and they end up handing it off. Playing for a field goal there. And then another drive, they get to the 9 with another 3rd and 6 situation. They go hurry up offense and hurry back to the line and try to throw and just end up throwing it away because it was going to be a sack. Now, they got field goals out of those drives, so they still scored points. That's good, but it was kind of curious decision-making there. I don't think I would have chosen to do any of the things they chose to do, but it's not my money, right? I don't have that on the line. But my point is, I thought when the offense didn't shoot itself in the foot with the penalties, they moved the ball pretty well. I thought they did a pretty decent job, when they avoided those situations. So I guess that would be the lesson going forward. Avoid the holding penalties, avoid the turnovers, which they did. How about this stat? All right, that was Pitt's 6th ACC game this season. They had no turnovers. It was the first time they had no turnovers in an ACC game this season. The previous 5 ACC games, which incidentally they went 2 and 3, they committed 11 turnovers in the previous 5 ACC games. That's that coaches always point to turnovers. It seems I always sort of feel like it's an easy kind of an easy out, an easy sort of excuse to make when there are bigger issues. But you commit 11 turnovers in 5 games. That's something you can probably point to. Just like the penalties were almost an issue in this game, or the penalties were the reason they didn't score like 40 or 50 in this game. Along those same lines, I think the turnovers were part of the reason they lost some of the games. I think that's why they lost the Louisville game at the very least, and potentially Georgia Tech as well. And they have, 3 turnovers in that game, including 1 in Georgia Tech territory. So there's always going to be factors that go into it. The one other thing I'll say about the offense is, I continue to believe in this receiving core. I continue to think it's a talented receiving core. I continue to think there's some good players out there. I think Jared Wayne is a good player. I think Kanate Mumfield is a really good player he's ready to break out, and maybe actually if he catches that touchdown, if Keaton Slovis puts the ball out there for him, that is a breakout game because he finished with 70 yards. He would have gone over 100 with that catch. If he put it out there where Mumfield could make the play, he scores a touchdown. It's a 100-yard game and a touchdown. yeah, I think that would be the breakout game, and I think it's coming for him. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. I think he's a talented player. And then Bub Means showed a little bit on Saturday when he actually was catching the ball. He can be a dangerous target with his size, and he can move pretty well for a guy as big as him. I think you sort of saw the potential for each of those three guys. I think in the win at Virginia, you saw what Jared Wayne can do, you saw what Bub Means can do, and you saw what Kanate Mumfield can do, even on a play where he didn't make the catch. Those three are talented. Those three are good targets for Kedon Slovis to throw to, and I think that that was part of the progress from Saturday's game as well, and they have to keep getting better at it. They've got weapons in the receiving core, just got to find ways to get them the ball. And finally, another tragic El Barto update. 1 target for Gavin Bartholomew. What are we doing here, people? I mean, what are we doing here? It's 10 games, and we're still only getting 1 target for El Barto. It's shameful. It is shameful. You know what else is shameful? Losing by 25 at home against a rival opponent. I really thought that basketball game, the backyard basketball, as we've taken to calling it, and by we I'm using the editorial we, the royal we, I thought that game was going to be more competitive. I thought Pitt was going to win, to be quite honest, because I looked at West Virginia. I didn't know if I thought all that much of their lineup. I wasn't entirely sure what I thought of their lineup, but I didn't think they were going to be that good. And I looked at their win over Mount St. Mary's when Mount St. Mary's shot like 48% from 3. I said, okay, this is how it'll go down. West Virginia is obviously going to have an advantage in the paint. That's going to be the case for any team pretty much until John Hughley returns, and we'll see if he's available to play on Wednesday night. West Virginia is going to have an advantage in the paint, but Pitt's going to be able to hit shots from outside. West Virginia's 3-point defense gave up some stuff to Mount St. Mary's. I think Pitt's going to be able to knock shots down. And at the beginning, it looked like that was going to happen. Greg Elliott hit like 3 right off the bat, including one was a 4-point play. It's great. And then it all fell apart after that. He hit 3. They only hit 2 more the entire rest of the game. Those 3 were in the first 5 minutes, and Pitt hit 2 more threes for the entire rest of the game. None in the second half. They were 5 of 12 in the first half, 0 of 11 in the second half. Nelly Cummings is in foul trouble. Jamarius Burton's in foul trouble. Federico's in foul trouble. I think Blake Hinson was in foul trouble. 4 of the 5 starters had 2 fouls in the first half and had to miss significant amounts of time, to the point where Nelly Cummings came back in and he gets 3 fouls. It's just, it was... Pitt, I think, has decent depth this year, but they don't have the kind of depth where they can absorb having 4 of their 5 starters sitting with 2 fouls in the first half. Not when one of those starters is the center, and that's a position where you're already, you don't have depth because John Hughley's not available. And so you end up with like Jorge Diaz-Graham playing center, even though Jeff Capel said multiple times he's a perimeter player. You end up with Nate Santos basically playing the 4 because they also don't have Will Jeffress, who could give you some minutes there. That was a really difficult situation. Now, it doesn't excuse how they defended. It doesn't excuse how they turned the ball over. It doesn't excuse just their general, poor offensive shot selection. I mean, I think they could have done they still could have done a better job even with those guys out. They were in a challenging situation at that point with the fouls, but they still could have done a better job even with those guys out. In the second half, when those guys came back, I mean, Cummings ultimately fouled out. Burton was playing in foul trouble. Blake Hinson was playing in foul trouble. Federico was playing in foul trouble. I mean, it was a mess. It was a more challenging matchup than I expected it to be, and it became even more challenging on top of that with the foul trouble that put guys on the bench and limited guys' minutes throughout the game. I think Pitt's better than they looked on Friday night at the Peterson Event Center. But they have another tough one coming up against Michigan on Wednesday night in the Legends Classic. So that's going to be, I can't say I feel great about Pitt's chances going into that game. But they're going to have to, they have to, the first thing they have to do is stay out of foul trouble. I mean, you need Nelly Cummings on the court. You need Jamarius Burton on the court. You need Blake Hinson on the court. You take those guys out of the mix and Federico too. For the time being, until John Hughley returns, you need Federico on the court. You take those guys out of the mix, and you are digging way deeper into your depth for more minutes than you ever really would have wanted to. And so that's a problem. You can't, you can't have that issue crop up again and have it, and hope that you're going to beat Michigan playing without a bunch of those guys for extended minutes like that. So still early in the season. I still think this team has some really interesting and intriguing potential with the 3-point shooting, but obviously Friday night did not go well. Saturday went better than Friday, and hopefully your Sunday was an improvement on both of them. I hope you had a great weekend. I appreciate everybody who tuned into the Morning Pitt here this morning. Thanks everybody who came out for the live stream on Saturday after the Pitt-Virginia game. We'll do another one of those after the Pitt-Miami game, or Pitt-Duke game this coming Saturday, I should say. And of course, we'll have these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week. Monday through Friday, we will be here with you for 20 minutes, half hour, however long it takes to talk about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. And there's stuff we didn't even get to today that we're going to have to cover tomorrow. So we'll have a new one of these out for you tomorrow on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and stay tuned to the website, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for watching today. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a great Monday, and we will talk to you tomorrow morning for another Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.